Good morning, Kigali, and thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas with respect to Rwanda's Payments for Ecosystem Services project, a project that Rwanda is about to embark on. Exciting indeed it is. And therefore, right off the bat, I would like to thank François Tetero and the team from the Water Authority for their support and the guidance and the assistance during the process of developing this Payments for Ecosystem Services scheme, as well as the Water for Growth in Rwanda. Without the team's support and assistance and guidance, as well as that of SHARE, it would not have been possible. So thank you guys. It was a real privilege for me to work with you in developing this exciting initiative. So, what are we going to talk about today? Right off the bat, we're going to define Payments for Ecosystem Services and ecosystem services per se. We're also going to look at the mechanics of the proposed Payments for Ecosystem Services project that we're about to embark on, and then also look at some of the details with respect to the planned pilot study within Rwanda. So without any further ado, let's focus on Payments for Ecosystem Services and what that entails, and let's start off with a definition thereof. One of the most famous definitions of Payments for Ecosystem Services is that which is provided by Sven Wunder, and it reads that Payments for Ecosystem Services is a voluntary transaction where a well-defined ecosystem service or a land use likely to secure that service is being bought by an ecosystem service buyer from an ecosystem service provider if and only if the ecosystem service provider secures ecosystem service provision. So there's a conditionality which refers to the fact that the impact has to be measured, monitored, and be reflected on regularly, and that payments needs to be based also on this measured impact. So we sit with two parties, a buyer and a seller, of an ecosystem service or a land use that is likely to lead to the enhancement or the betterment of ecosystem services, and it must be a voluntary transaction. So what would ecosystem services be? There are generally four different types of ecosystem services, starting with provisioning goods and services which are products directly from the ecosystem, like timber and meat, or regulating services. Those are the services that's vital for the functioning of the Earth system, for example, forests' ability to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Or cultural services, which includes this aesthetic and spiritual enjoyment that people gain from recreation. Or then supporting services, processes such as nutrient cycling, soil formation, that are vital to the well-being of an ecosystem. In this specific Payments for Ecosystem Services scheme, we're focusing on land use that contributes to soil stabilization. That is what makes this Rwandan Payments for Ecosystem Services project quite unique, because it focuses on soil and land use that contributes to soil stabilization. Soil stabilization that contributes to, among others, improved soil and agricultural productivity, improved income generation potential, increased carbon sequestration, improved water quality, increased lifespan of dams, mitigating the cost of electricity production, reduction in the loss of and damage in infrastructure, and lastly also then improved quality of life, and with it reducing the potential of a loss of life. So why do we think that Rwanda can get this Payments for Ecosystem Services project right? It started off with the fact that Payments for Ecosystem Services is one of the pillars of Vision 2050 that sets the vision for the country as a whole going forward for its development agenda. Also, the legislative and institutional framework required for Payments for Ecosystem Services already exists. Rwanda does not have to embark on new legislation or develop new institutions for Payments for Ecosystem Services to function. They're already in place. And lastly, there is the national will. As stated within Vision 2050 and various other documents, the need to curb soil erosion and to foster and usher in a whole new process of soil stabilization is a matter of the highest priority. It's a matter of strategic concern. So, what would be the mechanics of the proposed ecosystem services scheme then? We can start off by the fact that there are landowners, let's call them Farmer Joe, that's willing to make investments in natural capital, investments in their farm, and for that they will receive private benefits. But as a result of this investment in natural capital, there's also public benefits. Other people that benefit from them managing the land. But the other people, society as a whole, is not contributing to the cost of managing the land prudently and properly. And because of this disconnect between the person who owns the land and who has to manage the land and the people that receives benefits from that, there is a suboptimal investment in the management of the land and in looking forward towards future generations. So we need a situation, or we need a mechanism whereby the public at large can make a contribution towards the cost of land use and land use management as a whole. Therefore, there's a suboptimal investments in natural capital. That leads to a lack of proper land management. That leads to degradation. That leads to loss of ecosystem goods and services. And that places the entire system at risk, increasing the cost of living. And everybody is losing due to the mismatch between private investment and both private and public benefits. And therefore, payments for ecosystem services is a market-based economic instrument that seeks to build institutional bridges. It seeks to develop the economy and the ecosystem simultaneously. It seeks to enable landowners and users and the beneficiaries of ecosystem goods and services to engage meaningfully with one another. And soil is the logic unifier of people, planet, and profit. And therefore that this specific payments for ecosystem services scheme is focusing on soil and land use specifically that can contribute to soil stabilization, because everybody is to benefit for thereof. Using the catchment-based landscape restoration opportunities map of Rwanda and the CCROM decision support system, it was possible to calculate the estimated loss in topsoil in Rwanda. And it has been indicated that at least 45 million tons, or 4 tons per person per year, is lost. At a market value of about 30,000 tons Rwandan francs per ton, this translates to at least 1.4 trillion francs that is lost in terms of topsoil each year. Or put this other ways around, 114,000 francs per capita, or 20% of the GDP per capita. That is an enormous amount in terms of value that is every year lost due to soil erosion. And that does not include the loss of life, the loss of infrastructure, as well as any other losses and associated with it, or costs that might have been incurred through the increased cost of electricity generation as well as water treatment. That is only the value of the topsoil, calculates or estimate then at 1.4 trillion francs every year. Right, so how and what is being proposed for Rwanda? Let's look at the specific pilot study in brief. As mentioned within the definition of payments for ecosystem services, it requires both a buyer and a seller with respect to ecosystem services to facilitate this transaction. And this transaction has to be brokered through an intermediary. So who are the parties within the pilot study that Rwanda is about to embark on? The buyer of ecosystem goods and services would be EKN, the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The transaction is facilitated through RAFA, the SPIU. In the long run, this position is to be taken up by FUNARWA, but in the case study, FUNARWA will act as an observer. The seller of ecosystem goods and services would be the Sechoko and Karambo communities, and specifically then Sechoko microcatchment 6, 13 and 17, and then Karambo microcatchment 6. They will provide the ecosystem goods and services through landscape and catchment restoration, as well as the management and the maintenance thereof, through utilizing the community-based approach. And the community-based approach allows the landowners, therefore, to take ownership of their own land, manage their own land, and invest in their own land with the assistance of an ecosystem buyer, in this sense then EKN. But as in all transactions, this transaction has to be monitored. It has to be checked whether it has been done according to the terms of reference, according to the microcatchment action plan, which will act as the basis for the terms of reference. And a special agency that has to can be appointed to fulfill this task. That agency will then fulfill the role of the monitoring, reporting and verification agency that will report to RWAFA and then in the long run also to FUNARWA. And from that process, credits will be generated, ecosystem-based credits, based on soil stabilization and the enhancement of value within the entire society. So how are the credits then calculated or generated? For each intervention and each microcatchment, it will be calculated, starting off with soil stabilization effectiveness of the intervention, whether that is planting on the road verges, trees or fruit trees, or bench terraces, or radical terraces, or progressive terraces, or gully restoration, whatever that is. There's a soil stabilization effectiveness index for each of those interventions. Then the specific soil erodibility of the site of intervention is taken into consideration. Thereafter, the profile of that intervention. In other words, how long it takes for that intervention to reach maturity. Planting trees will take much longer before it will reach maturity than just to put in gabions and stop erosion. Those three aspects, soil stabilization effectiveness of the intervention, the soil erodibility of that specific site, as well as the profile in terms of the intervention maturity, combines to provide us with a relative soil erosion avoidance potential, tons per hectare per year. That potential avoidance is then combined with the size of the intervention to generate the soil erosion avoidance potential per intervention, tons per year, over the entire area. Once we combine those, the soil erosion avoidance potential per intervention with where in the landscape the specific site of intervention is, in other words, the landscape orientation, the higher up in the catchment it is, the more strategic it is, the more important it is, as well as the number of downstream water permit holders, as well as time, we generate the total number of potential credits that can be generated by a community within a catchment. The interventions, in order to be able to achieve and generate those credits, are then costed. And then once an institution, in this case EKN, is buying it, we know exactly how many credits they would have bought. And given the benefit of about 30,000 francs per ton of topsoil stock, we can calculate the benefits. And the combination of the cost of intervention as well as the benefit of the intervention can generate benefit cost ratios. And so for each intervention, for each microcatchment, the benefit cost ratios as well as the internal rate of return can be calculated. And this is an extremely exciting initiative that the Government of Rwanda has embarked on. And I wish the Government of Rwanda and all participants all the best in terms of this journey going forward in the endeavor to stop soil erosion for the betterment of all the people of Rwanda. Thank you.